Warning, this podcast typically features spoilers and strong opinions. Proceed with caution.
Hello, and welcome to Then a Moment, the podcast where two lifelong storytellers talk about stories. I'm Pavi Proczko, audiobook narrator, writer, and performer.
And I am Colin Funk, childhood development expert and teaching artist.
And today we're going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Honor Among Thieves.
Mm-hmm. The new movie came out.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the game, too. Yeah. But first, let's talk about our moment of the week.
Sure, let's do it. Why don't you go first this week?
Okay. I think my moment of the week, I was revisiting Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Oh.
And the new version, like the sequel to the game, is coming very soon. So I was familiarizing myself a little more, and I was just noting how good the storytelling for it is. Where a lot of these kind of open world video games have these really grand stories that are it's easy to lose the thread for what like the main plot is. And I think Breath of the Wild does a really good job of keeping that thread really tight, but being able to discover all the parts of the story in whatever order you find them out. Because it's kind of in these like flashes of memories, but you're not guaranteed to find all the memories in the same order every time you play. So
you have to find them all eventually?
Yes, you will have to find them all in order to like do the game, but I just thought it was really masterful. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, is there anything specific?
No, I was going through the little, like you can go back and like watch the little movies to like get the whole thing. And like watching it in order is different than watching it in the order that you found them, because you can watch them in chronological order, but you might necessarily find them in chronological order. And how to create a story that you're able to unfold each part of it, even though it's not chronological. It's just they really did a great job.
I'm trying to visualize it. Can you give me an example? Because I have not played.
Part of the plot is that Link has there was a war 100 years ago. He was gravely wounded and has been regenerating for the past 100 years. And he wakes up with no memory of what's going on. So he wakes up and now Hyrule is like ruled by all these monsters, and he has to go find out about what happened 100 years ago in order to figure out how to defeat Calamity Ganon, right? So he finds out eventually that there are all these places in the world that he has to find where an important event happened 100 years ago. And so every time you find those places, you get there, and then you watch this flashback about like he receives the memory of what happened. So, and they're scattered all over the world. So depending on how you find them, what order you find them in, because some of them are easier to find than others, you get these pictures of like landscape that looks different. So the details of it, but so when I first played it, the first scene I saw was Princess Zelda failing to ignite her power. And then the second scene I found was one where Princess Zelda is very annoyed with Link, where it's like the beginning of their relationship. Whereas the first one I found was like, she's like in the all is lost moment where she's like, I'm not going to be able to defeat Ganon. And she comes and finds Link and the other heroes are there. And I'm like, who are all these other heroes that are around? I don't even know who they are. And then the second scene I see is just Link coming and bothering Zelda, and Zelda being like, what are you bothering me for? And then it unfolds from there, where you get to like meet all the different heroes, and they come in and have different roles, but it's all in a different chronological order. So kind of how it just kind of blossoms this story.
Interesting.
No matter what order you watch them in.
Very
I think it's really interesting.
But because they're starting from, this is what happened, how did we get here? It's kind of like, it's just like the Dark Crystal thing, or the Moulin Rouge.
Yeah, kind of, exactly. Yeah. Well, we see the end because we're 100 years later. Right. How do we get here? Now we're just finding those, how we got here little by little. It's really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, what about you?
Well, I kind of speed binged Welcome to Chippendales, that little fictional docuseries with Kumail. What's his last name?
Jamani.
Good.
Sure. Cut that out. Welcome to Chippendales. You said it was fictional?
Yeah, it is a fictionalized
Oh.
docuseries.
But is it about like the real people?
Yes.
Kumail Nanjiani.
Nanjiani.
Yep, Nanjiani.
Okay, so I watched Welcome to Chippendales.
Oh, cool.
Did a little binge watch Welcome to Chippendales with Kumail Nanjiani. Oh, I'm very good at that name. And it was very interesting. So it retells the story, like the real life story of the man who started Chippendales, and there's a whole lot of controversy tied in. There's murders and there's arson and there's like crazy things that happen along the way in building this nightclub, first in LA and then expanded to New York. Anyway, the cast is really incredible. I was surprised, but I thought particularly I was interested in both Annalee Ashford, who you just saw.
I did. I just saw Annalee Ashford
in Sweeney Todd in New York.
Yep.
And Juliette Lewis, who has been around, forever.
Yeah.
But just like to see her still kicking, and she's awesome. There's just so many really great moments that just like give all the actors that they're just like, okay, you're gonna act now. Like you could tell like these like there's a moment where Juliette Lewis's love interest, who's a very important person in the show, he, spoiler alert, he dies. But she comes back and is like knocking on the door and is just like given. His name was, they called him Steve. Kumail's character in the show, just like yelling at him through the I think that scene was my favorite. The whole thing,
the gate, yeah,
through the gate.
It was one of the few parts that I actually caught while you were watching it.
Yeah, she's just like yelling at him and so upset. They come and him and Annalee Ashford, who plays his wife, come and try to like calm her down, and then like they have a great relationship that they built between them, Juliette Lewis and Annalee Ashford's characters. So they were able to kind of calm her down, but Juliette Lewis was like still so mad at both of them. And then they go back, and then Annalee Ashford like has this moment where while she was like calming Juliette Lewis down, she like has her suspicions, and she's this like very talented accountant in the show, and like calls him out on like there's $15,000 missing, so there's something
that maybe he was
involved,
and
and calls him out, and that has this like really great moment of like being so like finally getting pushed past her breaking point, because he's done a lot of shady things. She's been involved with a lot of shady things.
Yeah.
But like this moment, she's like, nope, that's too much. That's too far.
Right.
I'm done. I gotta go. And in a way that's like, they didn't make it that Kumail's character was like really trying to like scare or intimidate her to stay, because he really like, she was the only thing he like really cared about. Which I thought was very, very interesting. I think Kumail Nanjiani is incredible in it, and his acting, and especially that one scene I thought was really brilliant and got to show off all of their skills.
Oh, yeah. That's
Very
great.
Cool. Very fun.
All right. Let's get into the story, shall we?
The story.
Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
Yes.
I believe it's your turn to do the synopsis.
Honor Among Thieves. It is about these two party members, Edgin and Holga. They're in jail for trying to steal a tablet of resurrection to bring Edgin's wife back to life. But they end up appealing their case and escaping out of jail to reunite with Edgin's daughter Kira and get back that tablet of resurrection, just to find that their former party members, Forge, is working with the evil red wizard, Sophina, and they have been lying to Kira, and they're going to keep this tablet for themselves, try to execute them, but they escape again. They have to figure out a way to sneak back in to steal the relic. So they hook up with some more party members, Simon, a sorcerer who's bad at magic, and a friend of his, a Doric tiefling druid whose homeland is getting destroyed by the big city, so she wants to help out. And they have to figure out a way to break into the city, which they eventually do, find out that tablet's not where it's supposed to be, and instead they have to fight in this big battle to escape with their lives and with Kira, just to realize that the evil red wizard is doing even bigger and worse things, and they go back, save the whole town, and everyone's happy.
All right.
Ooh.
Very good. Wonderful. Yeah. What did we know going in? Of course, we've already talked a little bit about knowing a bit about Dungeons and Dragons. I am a dungeon master for a few games. I sometimes do it professionally. During the pandemic, when it was the only thing that we were able to do, I was running like 11 games at once. And so we've got a bit of play under our belts.
Yeah. We've both played a number of times. You've run games a number of times. You started an Adventurers League.
I did start an Adventurers League here in Chicago. We have quite a bit of experience in Dungeons and Dragons, and I've a lot of experience dungeon mastering. Playing
the game, playing different campaigns. We both have done a lot of research on the world and different classes and characters, and I've for a while was reading the Drizzt books, and that's a series also set in Forgotten Realms. And so I was very familiar with the world in general, and some stories that have been there. So we knew a bit about the world, but we didn't know anything about this actual movie. I
didn't know anything
about
at all.
The story. I didn't even know, really, like, I know who Chris Pine is, and I'd heard of Michelle Rodriguez, but there's a couple actors that I'm like, okay, I recognize them, but they weren't even like...
Yeah. On your mind.
Hugh Grant, obviously.
Yeah, Hugh Grant's in it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite casting. I guess we should save that for the superlatives. But I knew too that there was a movie in 2000.
Oh yes, there was
an old movie also with like a star-studded cast with Jeremy Irons and Marlon Wayans, and it was not good.
No.
And we'll talk about that. But it was really terrible. There also was an old 80s TV show, like a cartoon.
Oh, yes. I did know that as well, yeah.
Which, spoiler alert, there's some Easter eggs in the movie with them, actually, which is interesting.
I don't know that either. I've never seen that.
But I do know that existed. I never watched any of it, but I do know that show existed. So beyond that, we went in kind of blind.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the interesting things, we went in, we knew, I had never seen the original Dungeons & Dragons movie, but I did know that it wasn't particularly popular, and it didn't particularly use the device of Dungeons & Dragons in an interesting way. From what I understand, it was much more generic high fantasy than it was a Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that for sure. Yeah, the dragons didn't have personalities. They were basically just animals. It wasn't in a recognizable world, not that I remember. Yeah.
Right. And so the hope going in, for me at least, was let's hope this is because of this like new boom in popularity in Dungeons and Dragons because of Stranger Things, because of the pandemic and how easy it is to play Dungeons and Dragons.
The 5th
over
edition.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh, and the 5th
definitely,
edition. That's right.
Yeah.
Because of all those things, I think it made more sense to actually take the movie and inject as much of the game into it to kind of appeal to the general public, or at least the fan base. Maybe not the general public, but in saying that, meaning that a lot of the general public is now it's more part of the zeitgeist to know at least a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. And it's the editions, if you don't know, have been several editions of Dungeons & Dragons since the 70s when it was created. And this most recent iteration maybe came out in like 2012, maybe. It's pretty old now, which is why they're moving on to D&D, and that's for another time. But it really leans heavily on the storytelling element, the collaborative storytelling part of the game. So it actually, I think to your point, it's kind of the perfect time to do a movie because the game itself is structured basically so that you can play your own high fantasy action movie.
Right.
And so now you've got the art forms, the mediums are really kind of like melding together.
So at first glance, what would you say? Would you say that the new movie was an improvement?
Yes, I loved it.
I would agree.
All in all, I loved the movie. I thought it was really great.
Yeah,
I thought it was super
great.
fun, and it was super funny, and it was written really well. And then I think what I appreciated versus the first one in 2000 was that addition of little kind of Easter eggs of the gameplay. If you don't know how to play the game, you don't know anything about Dungeons & Dragons, it's okay. You'll like it anyway. It's enjoyable regardless. But if you do know the game, you'll see how current gameplay has influenced the story.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was very curious to see how they would take something that it involves rolling dice and chances and gameplay and choices and characters' feelings and opinions kind of clouding or not clouding, but directing where the story is going.
Right.
And I was very curious how that would read in a movie that didn't involve the players. So
Right.
it wasn't a movie that looked at people playing the game. It was as if we were in the game.
Right. How can we storify or like make the game elements into story elements? How does it actually like meld like that?
Yeah.
I think one, for example, is like right at the very beginning when we have
I think this very beginning is a real, like, it gets to it right away.
where we've got Edgin and we've got Holga. They're trying to appeal to get released from their prison sentence early, and they're waiting for like this judge to come who's an Aarakocra with wings, and they're, for whatever reason, Edgin's saying, I want to wait for him, but he's telling a story, and they're going to appeal and do all this stuff. And it's just so interesting to have kind of those conflicts of like, well, this is actually what he wants, what he's waiting for. It's what... how convincing are they? You know, did it actually work? Their appeal, did it work?
Well,
we find out that it actually did work. They did actually win earlier release, but they didn't trust it. And it's just so much like an actual Dungeons and Dragons game where the dungeon master is like, okay, all you need to do is roll a good persuasion check, and they roll a good persuasion check, but the players don't trust it. It was good enough, right? But they don't know. They don't know what the dungeon master has planned. So instead, when the Aarakocra comes in, Edgin grabs him, they jump out the window and survive the fall out of this tower. And it's just like, it's just the classic players throwing a wrench into what the dungeon master has planned.
Yeah, and I think they do that in a couple different ways. I mean, like you said, the Edgin's character, the judges keep being like, okay, we're ready to go. It's time to go. And he keeps being like, oh, I want it to happen like this.
Yeah.
And that is something that players often do
All the time.
to dungeon masters, where they're like, oh, can we do it like this instead? And the dungeon masters be like, no, that's not what is happening. So continue. So
you have to do it like this.
So it was like really, it was fun to see this like they like build it in a couple times throughout the movie where there's like a struggle on like, all you have to do to get out of this is, like you said, roll your persuasion check. You have to just be persuasive and you'll be able to get out of here.
Right.
It's a pretty simple, we're starting off the thing. This is not a big, hard task to do. You just got to convince them to get out.
I mean, sometimes I'll even have things as a dungeon master where it's like, all you need to do is roll to make sure you don't roll a 1. Like, you just have to not critically fail in order to make this happen.
And players will be like, I want to do something else.
Yeah, they're just like, I'm going to do something that's not designed. It's like, okay, fine.
Like they get in their head, they have this like pre-made plan because they're talking about it. They're like, oh, we can't wait because this character, this Eric Coker character, he's now on the board. He's now on the council.
Right.
So because he's there, I'm sure we'll win. Setting us up to be like, okay, he will listen to your appeal. Like, he's on our side. He'll like us.
And they really just want to use his wings.
But their plan, just like they're like, ooh, we're so clever.
Yeah.
We're gonna just push him out the window because we know he can get us out the tower because he's an eagle.
Right.
And he can land us safely. And because they have that in their brain, they don't even consider how well their persuasive skills are working. Even though another thing that they do is they really, without, telling us to our face a lot of the time, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, like each character has a very clear class.
Yeah.
So in Dungeons and Dragons, when you play, you choose a character, you usually choose a race, a class, and some other features along with that. But those are the two main ones. And so each of the classes would be something that they do. Something like either they are a fight heavy character or a magic heavy character.
Like what abilities they have to let them interact with the world.
Yeah. It's kind of job, kind of what they're specialized at, what they're good at, what their abilities are, like you said. And so that's very important in the games, obviously. And so each of these characters, like Edgin is clearly a bard, and that's a very simple way of showing that because a bard plays music and tells stories.
So he has like this lyre that he carries with him or a lute or whatever.
Whatever it is.
And he is persuasive. He's the idea guy through the whole thing.
And he's a jack of all trades, but master of... He's not like particularly good at one specific thing.
Right.
And they even make a joke. They're like, what do you do? What is your specialty? And that is, again, it's like an Easter egg because any D&D player is like, what does a bard do?
Yeah,
what is
it's like a really good kind of like do everything, but nothing particularly well, except for convince people, usually.
I think bards are either really easy to play because you can kind of do whatever, or they're really hard to play because you're not really specialized in something specific. So it was like very fun that they gave like a little nod to that in the way that character shows up and they're like, what are you doing? But, he's the idea guy. He gets everyone together, which is easier, I think, even in a movie than it is in gameplay to show why this is helpful.
Right.
And side note, I think the movie does a really great job at showing how you use different classes in a campaign.
Yeah, it's like it's almost instructional for players.
Yeah.
It's actually the characters in the movie behave how good players should behave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is, Edgin is a bard. So he has a high charisma, which means he has high persuasive skills. He could have easily persuaded himself out of the situation and chose another tactic and succeeded at this other tactic, which is another very fun thing about Dungeons & Dragons. There's not one way to win anything or to do anything. And even when you fail something, you don't fail and lose. Something is changed in the story.
It moves the story forward.
So if they had just appealed and gotten out of jail, well then they wouldn't have been. Now, because they've escaped, now they're being followed by law enforcement.
Right.
Now there's wanted signs. Now when they get to Neverwinter,
They already know that they've escaped.
they've escaped. So Forge has his former, the guy running Neverwinter, who's got his daughter, now has a proof that he's lying to them and that he's this bad, awful person that he can convince Kira, his daughter, that he's not there for the right reasons because he's...
Right, it's the consequences element. A really good dungeon master will bring in all of the things that the players have done and all the decisions and make sure that they have reverberating effects. You can always bring it back. Prime example is even with the Aarakocra, that they leap out this window. By the end, when Forge is now in jail and he's trying to get his own appeal and it's rejected, he tries to do the same thing. He grabs the Aarakocra and tries to jump out the window, but the window's not there anymore.
Yeah, they blocked
so
it
it's just
off.
they blocked it off because the dungeon master of the movie is like, that's not going to happen again. I'm not going to let you do that.
Exactly.
You know, it's like
because
we want to see the consequences of the choices, and that's the prime storytelling engine of Dungeons and Dragons is that we have choices presented to us, we make decisions, and then those have effects as we go.
Right. So, I mean, using that kind of gameplay as kind of fuel for story can be really effective.
Yeah.
And I think I am also very, like going into this, I was also curious whether or not they'd fall into some pitfalls of using some of that gameplay as kind of like a really loose story.
Yeah.
I've listened to, there's so many podcasts out there where they are playing Dungeons and Dragons games. It's players are on a table playing a game and they're building the story as they go.
Yeah.
That some of them are great. Some of them are not that they're not great, but if we look at them just purely, if we're just purely looking at the storytelling element, sometimes the gameplay gets in the way.
Right.
Where people aren't doing things necessarily based on how they think the story should be propelled. Sometimes they do it based on what they think would be cool for their character to do right then.
Right.
Or they want to mess something up or throw a wrench in things. And so we're seeing a lot of
people goofing around a lot instead of aiming toward a similar end. I'm playing this game. I'm actually a main character in this story, and I want this story to move forward.
Right.
And there's like a constellation of choices you can make that makes sense there, but a lot of times those like these live play podcasts where there's a lot of anachronisms or people making jokes, and it's clearly fun for the people who are in the room, but for us listening, it's going to be a 4-hour podcast listening to people joke around, and I'm not actually that interested, and I don't think it's that funny because I'm not there, and I just wanted to know more about that world, want to know more about that story.
Yeah, and it's hard as a dungeon master to do that in a game, but we're talking about a movie version of a game.
Right.
So what I was looking for, one of the things, is like whether or not they'd fall into some of those traps.
Yeah.
But I don't. There's a couple moments, and we could talk about those in a bit, where I think that they use, devices from Dungeons and Dragons, and they're not as believable as story elements, and they feel almost convenient in a way that, like, you can roll the dice, and if you roll well, something good will happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. There's no more earning than that in a Dungeons and Dragons game.
Yeah.
If you roll well, you win.
Right.
You succeed.
Yeah.
You don't win necessarily, but you succeed at that thing. And there's a couple of moments where that kind of happens, and I don't necessarily, like, if you're not a Dungeons and Dragons person, maybe I think you'd be like, I don't know if I buy that.
I don't know if I buy it. Yeah.
It is fun to watch as someone who plays and being like, I can see, like, the things that happen, there are times where you're like, that person rolled well, that person rolled poorly. Well, they do that well. But the one thing I think they really leaned into that actually worked really well is they really stuck to archetypes.
Yeah.
And they had a very clear player character versus NPC setup.
Yeah.
And I think that was really, because it was so, and we can break that down in a second, but I think because they kept it so simple, it allowed the story to progress in a way that made sense in a narrative structure.
Right. Yeah.
Because they stuck kind of to the kind of like the core of what these characters would do, and not like they didn't leave it so much up to a player's whims in the times that were important.
Right.
Where like they did it a little bit at the beginning, like we said, in the setup scene, but mostly the bard did things that make sense for the bard. The wizard used magic. The druid was a wild shape, which meant they can turn into animals. That's like a very common druid type. That's what their main feature is. They turn into animals, and that's what they use in gathering information, in fighting, in every part of their journey. They're using that skill as their foremost skill. I've played with a lot of people that want to do everything and all the things, and they're trying to like be as creative and cool instead of like, okay, well, we're in a battle and I got to turn into my most powerful animal.
Yeah. You're the barbarian. You need to go in and just smash heads. Don't do something clever. Just go in and do the thing that you're good at.
Holga the barbarian.
Holga the barbarian did
smashed.
That. That's all she did.
Smash
She
and
went
go.
and smashed people.
There were times in battles where the fighters fought and the people who weren't particularly good fighters kind of sat back and waited. Yeah. And that is something that is really hard to do in a game. Yeah. But makes sense and helps tell the story. Right. In a movie. Yeah. In a movie setting.
For sure.
If it's like, that's why we say it's like really informative of how we think people should play.
Absolutely.
Because if you're sticking to those things, you do drive the story. It doesn't have to, you don't all have to be perfect at fighting. That's kind of the point. You're building a party that is diverse so that in different things, different people have different skills. Right. And they do it really well.
Yeah, I think that that's a place where the movie strength really comes through, where something that's occurred to me about, I was watching the Ginny D video about the original, the 2000 movie, and she says something really interesting. If you don't know Ginny D, she's great. Dungeon Master advice and player advice. Nice. Really excellent. She's like a cosplayer, but really, really good. DM tips and tricks on YouTube. Nice. But she did a little review, and she pointed out that the 2000 movie had one main character. Everybody else was kind of like a side character.
Ooh, okay.
And something that this movie does really well is that you have the party. Yeah, there's like a main character. I guess Edgin would be the main character, but when you have the party come in, you've also got Holga. They really all are, as an entity, once they get together, they're the hero collectively. Yes. And that makes it really interesting when you have an NPC type character, a non-player character, like the paladin Zank comes in, and we're thinking, oh, he's just going to be another part of the team. But he's like so different personality-wise. Everybody's so pithy and funny. Mm-hmm. He comes in and he's very, very stiff. He talks like he has all this information. Yes. He talks like he's like...
he
has
ask him
exposition.
The question and he has the answer. It's like you're playing a video game, you're walking up and they're like, yes, this is the answer I have.
Right. Or I need your help. And he says, no, I'm not going to help you. I've forsaken that part of my life. And you say the right thing. Yes. You clicked the correct little option.
Yeah.
And then he's like, aha, you've said the right words in the right order. Come follow me. I will help you now. And he has no sense of humor. He even there's this hilarious scene where he's like walking away after they've like parted ways after their mission's done, and he's walking away in a straight line, and they're like, wow, wow, he does walk in a straight line, doesn't he? Oh, you think he's going to move around there? Oh, there's a big boulder coming. Oh, is he going to go around it? Oh, nope. He just goes right over it. And he just like goes and just walks right over the boulder. Just doesn't change his direction at all. Yeah. And it's like very clearly supposed to be this non-player character.
Yep.
And there are others too, like the bad guy Sofina.
Sofina's also
very one-dimensional.
Very one-dimensional. Yeah. But like they do that so well. They're not that like I think it is pretty common. It makes sense. Like we want all the characters in our movie to be really deep and really fleshed out, and we want to feel like everyone has this like deep backstory and there's really strong reasons and conflicts within them.
But it actually just gets in the way in the end.
It gets in the way a lot.
And that's that might be a lesson for dungeon masters, in fact. It's make the motivations a bit simpler because it's going to get too much when you're like, oh, but are they good or are they bad? We're going to give them the complicated backstory.
No.
Now you're confusing all your players. I do it all the time with my players that they're like, but is he good or bad? I don't know. Like really just simplify it. Yeah. Make them bad if they're bad. Make them good if they're good and have a lot of information and just let them do the thing, because the stars, the people who are supposed to be complex with lots of conflicts, are the players. The player characters are the ones that get to be in on the joke. They're the ones that get to change and make really difficult decisions and have conflicts in their past.
They all have these rich backstories. I think that's hilarious. I think the use of backstories in this one, again, a nod to playing Dungeons and Dragons, because every player wants to come up and be like, I have this whole big backstory, and sometimes it makes a difference and sometimes it doesn't. Like in the movie, I love how they do Holga's character, where she has this backstory where she used to be married to a halfling. And she just like, they're like going through his town and she's like, I gotta go talk to my ex. Is it Bradley Cooper, right?
Yeah. It was so weird.
Bradley
Cooper. I was like, is that
who I think has a great performance?
It's a great job.
I think that scene is excellent.
It's really, really nice because it just ends up, rather than being like a jilted lover yelling at her ex, it's like they sit down and have like a really heartfelt conversation, and she gets an object that becomes very important later.
It feels so much to me like the dungeon master was like, okay, we did this thing. You had this like really great interaction. You used your Holga never is very charismatic,
right?
But like has this relationship that they build in the backstory, and the dungeon master was like, you know what, that was a nice little interaction.
You get inspiration.
You get a thing. You get
you get inspiration. Here's a wand.
Here's a thing.
And then I love how another thing that works really well. It's another instance of like the players kind of like throwing a wrench into the gears, where they're like in the Underdark and they're gonna go find this helmet thing with Zenk, and Zenk is explaining the very, very detailed puzzle that the dungeon master has just set up about how to get across the bridge.
NPC,
and it's
very D&D. These like
and it's like someone's very clever put it together, and then Simon the sorcerer doesn't realize that where the bridge begins, steps on a thing, and it's the wrong thing, and it destroys the whole thing. It's just like all of that explanation, all that work, that puzzle is destroyed and gone.
And then they're like, oh, we accidentally have this overpowered magic item.
Yes, where it's like, oh, the dungeon master's like, I guess that wand you got that's been in,
that's a wand of teleportation.
Yeah, that staff is a wand now that will help you do the thing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and that's like some good DMing where it's like quick, I'm going to give you a treasure and we're not sure what it is yet. It's just going to be an heirloom and it's going to have treasure on it.
They made it very clear that this is an important object. You don't know what it is yet. I don't know. It's like very
fun. Really well done.
But they're using them as these story points. They're not. It's not just. Again, it doesn't feel disorganized. It doesn't feel sloppy. It's like these complications that would happen in any story are really fleshed out.
It's very funny to people who aren't players, and the people who are players see it and we're like, wow, good DM, or they rolled really well on that. I mean, even there's like the gelatinous cube moment where it's like jumping into a gelatinous cube and people being able to get out of it. It's like no one jumps into a gelatinous cube in the game. If you've ever played the game, you know the gelatinous cube is death. You don't want to do that.
People do
in the movie. Yes, for sure. In the movie, they do it because it's like the only way to escape is going to be this thing, this plan they have, and it's just like, well, that's a suicide mission unless you rolled a 20, unless you rolled really, really well. And it's like you see the characters in the movie have rolled really well. It's like this amazing feat.
Or it's like this druid player who's like, I have this really cool idea. I'm going to be a snake and swim out of it because I have a swimming speed.
Yeah.
And like can move through this kind of material. And that might not be something written in about that character or for what snakes can do.
But the cool.
The DM might be like, "That's so cool! I want to make it work."
Yeah.
So roll. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, and
let's
it obviously does. Yeah.
Because that's why we love those moments in those movies, in any sort of fantasy movie, is when the main characters come up with a creative solution. It's not just like the skills they've been using over and over again,
right?
But they find some creative way out of their problems.
Right. We don't want to just kamehameha our way out of everything. Dragon Ball Z reference for all you fans out there.
Really mixing it up
today.
I'm
mixing it up today. Jeez. So anything else work that you want to talk about?
I mean,
so much worked. I really did like it a lot.
Yeah, I guess. So we don't have to exhaust that.
No. What didn't work?
Not very much. Well, okay. The thing is, this movie doesn't take itself seriously. It's clearly a comedy.
I think, in fact, it's a bit of its strength because versus the 2000 movie, which kind of did take itself pretty seriously, and it just ended up being cheesy and stupid. Here, it was very self-aware what it was doing.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of moments that because of the way they structured it, they didn't have a fully fleshed out story arc, I guess you would say. The Simon has to get attuned to this magical object, and we've talked it, like they set it up at the beginning that Simon's not a very good magician.
Sorcerer.
Yes, that is a particular kind of magician.
Yes.
Sure, magic user.
Yeah.
He's not very good at it yet.
Yeah. Sure.
I assume. I'm like, he's just low level.
Yeah.
Which I think is, again, clever and a little bit of a nod. But he goes through this series of trying to attune with this magical
helmet
thing. And then he comes face to face with an image of his grandfather, who
great-grandfather or something.
Something.
It's just like he's a descendant of this great wizard.
Yeah, and I think there's this like inner conflict with him and why he's not. I don't know. I felt they brought it up a couple times and then resolved it, and it felt a little quick. It felt a little rushed.
I think that's true of the whole movie. There's just like a lot of story that they have packed in, and honestly did pretty well and kept it really light, and it moves really fast, but sometimes it's like breakneck speed where we are like really moving, and really so much happened. It could have been a series. It could have been a series of like, it's a comedy. Make it half hour, right? It's a series. It's 8 episodes in a season, half-hour episodes. We could have lived a little bit longer in there. We could have justified we have like some really short flashbacks that end up trying to be the emotional heart of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's successful to a point, but I don't actually feel anything watching it. It's just kind of like, he needs to let go of his wife. So they do this whole flashback about seeing his wife, and there's a dragonfly, and I need to let her go. Yeah. You need to let it go. Don't kill it. Let it go. And I get what you're trying to do, but you don't earn it that way. Because it's just too fast.
The pacing, I would say, overall was too fast. And it's hard as somebody who likes D&D and was very, tickled by all the references and all the Easter eggs. So a lot of that I was able to forgive. So it's hard for me to kind of like take myself out of that. But if I'm watching this without any, like what would I be like?
Right.
What doesn't work because they're trying, because they're, like you said, they're trying to get each of the party to have their full story arc.
Yeah.
The pacing is super fast.
Well, and that, I wonder if they had lengthened any of it, if they had made it, say, a series, would it not have been fast enough to make any of the humor make sense? We would have just had another Lord of the Rings or another Game of Thrones.
Sure.
It's just the speed is what makes the comedy work.
And I'm wondering, again, it feels like it does a thing where it feels like a one shot. This is like this first time, which is, the first time a new player plays Dungeons and Dragons, playing a one shot.
We're going to get exploration. We're going to get social. We're going to get
all the pieces
battle
of it. And we have all of these fun, different things that like resolve really nicely and not that difficultly.
Because maybe they won't come back next time to play.
Yeah. And that's what it feels like. They're making this movie. It feels like almost an experiment. Like, oh, is this going to be something fun?
Right.
Can we expand this world? Can we expand this particular story?
Right.
Can we expand this party into multiple movies? Of course they want to do that.
Of course, yeah.
Why wouldn't they want to make more money? That's
right.
If you can turn anything into a series, that's how you make money.
Right.
And instead of doing the thing where they're like, ooh, we get this far, what happens next? They do give a little bit like, ooh,
yeah, there's
what can
things
happen
could.
next?
There's a lot of like, not loose ends per se, but it's just like we've opened up a lot of things. We've seen different factions. We know about the Harpers. We've seen factions like the Emerald Enclave. We know that Neverember is back in power in Neverwinter. We've heard about the nobles from Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate are dead because they succumbed to the magic. Like, so there's stuff that happened. And of course, the Thayans. Like, we have the Wizards of Thay are trying to like spread their influence all over the world. So there's
here,
a lot
that's certainly not the only.
Right. There's a lot of story hooks that they could absolutely bring forward. So it's a very good first adventure where it's like, we have this nice, tidy little, very classic adventure with really archetypal allies and villains, and our heroes do this really difficult thing and really bond. And now, do you want to come back?
And I think as like kind of a fun, easy, comedic movie, it's nice. It's an easy watch in terms of feeling satisfied by the story itself. Yeah. I think it does lack in that, like, in the substance. They kind of rush through it a little bit, and I could have watched like a movie for each of the characters or whatever that,
and maybe
that
they
tied
will
together.
now, maybe
Who knows?
Yeah. Still, I think I'd see it again soon.
Oh yeah,
I would see it again now. Right now, it's not like I think, oh, wait a minute. I would love to see it again. I think it was so fun.
I think there's probably more to catch too. That's the other thing. As a Dungeons and Dragons player, there's a lot of little things, and I'm sure I didn't catch them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to our superlatives.
Let's do it. All right. So we start with our Oscar moment.
Oscar moment.
Oh, wait. I know mine.
Okay.
Going back to the design team, what I was really happy to see was puppets.
That's what I was going to say. Puppets.
They used puppets in the movie. Big, full creature costume puppets.
Of like Dragonborns,
Aarakocra. Absolutely.
Oh, so cool.
Different creatures. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, there was obviously some CGI, but it felt like a really good balance of things, something that I go back to over and over again. Too much CGI just doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
It gets into that uncanny valley, and it just like, you don't get sucked in the same way to a movie.
And it was a problem with the first Dungeons and Dragons movie that there was a lot of this, like, really, it was 2000. So it's
2000,
like bad
that's, like, the
CGI,
worst.
including Ginny D pointed this out, but there's like this whole scene where there's like dragon's blood starts pouring over these, like, this staircase. And it's like, that's like one of the easiest things to make if you're like an effects person in a movie.
Yeah.
Like, you do blood effects.
Blood
That's
is
so easy, but
very
instead
easy.
they did like this CGI, like blood going down, and it looks so stupid. Oh my gosh.
Always do it real and then enhance if you need to.
Yeah.
If you need it to look a little different, just enhance with CGI.
Go the route of Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. Or just the original Dark Crystal. Those puppets, they
puppets are
work
incredible.
so well.
Puppets really do. They keep it. They feel more real. They really bring it. Puppets are magic.
I think
Puppets
there was
are a
something
magical
too
thing.
about the puppets that made me feel like it attached it to like the dice rolls for some reason. Dungeons and Dragons is played with a
What?
set of dice,
Yeah.
and oftentimes with minis. And there's
Okay,
just
and
something
minis,
about the
sure.
fact of having
Actual
tangible puppets that wasn't
I see what you're
digital made
Yes.
it tabletop. It made it feel
I see.
homey and just it was real and tangible.
Yeah, which I mean, as you know, we played a lot over Zoom,
Yeah.
and there's D&D Beyond,
Sure.
the website. You can. It's very easy. That's where I get my character sheets. But you can roll right on the website, and some people do, and that's pretty easy. It's easy to keep track of what you're rolling. But I
just
still
not
roll
as
with
fun.
dice every single time.
We just played the other day. A friend of ours put together a campaign for his birthday,
Yeah.
and I resolved to just print out my character sheet.
Yeah,
and
you did.
that was the most fun I've had playing in a long time. And I play every few weeks with a group over the internet, and it's just having actual physical piece of paper and a pencil with the dice and doing it that way.
Yeah.
There's something about it just brings you, it grounds you into the room. And so I think that really mimicked that for me, that those costumes.
There's a tangible element of it that easily could be digitized,
Yeah.
but it's not, and it gives a groundedness or reality to the situation.
Yeah. So that is a Oscar moment for sure.
They were good too. I mean, they were well done.
Really well done.
Puppets, characters, creatures,
Costumes.
I don't know if I don't know if there's like full puppets or if it's like a sci-fi like special effects makeup team. Probably both.
Yeah.
Excellent work.
Yeah,
because
really
it really, I think that bad CGI can really
Mess it up. Yeah.
and anytime I see a good puppet, I'm in.
Yeah. I think in that case then, I'll just switch and I'll move to the directing. I thought it was directed really well. And this I guess speaks specifically to the storytelling element. I don't necessarily want to give it to the writing for all of the reasons that we just talked about, where it's like we're trying to pack so much into the story. But to be able to kind of walk the line of game and movie in that way, I think was really effective. And it was a team, it was two, directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. Goldstein was the director of Game Night.
Game Night, that's right.
Which I haven't seen, but you have.
Yes, I really liked it.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be an interesting one to talk about. But
Yeah, I think I'm
because
more
it's a really, and he's clearly a game person.
Yeah.
like a board game tabletop. He's
Right.
I mean, Game Night is very clearly influenced by real games.
Sure.
And very interesting.
And I think that they were able to infuse, even though there was a lot packed in, lots of feeling, stories with a small amount of time that they had, and pay homage to the game, as well as have this vision of like, the use of flashbacks, the use of humor to tell the story and move the story forward. I just thought that they did a really excellent job. Really good. Oscar.
So we had an Oscar moment for best one-word line.
One word
Exclamation.
line? What? Okay. You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Do you have one?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me yours so I can.
Jonathan.
Oh my gosh, yes. I forgot. Oh, that's so funny. Jonathan. Oh, it's so good. It's the Aarakocra's name is Jonathan, I guess, or Jonathan.
Because it would have to be like a
something,
like an eagle sound.
Yeah, like Jonathan,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so when they like, there's this halfling or gnome that's on the
knows?
tribunal. I don't know. But when they like grab the Aarakocra and like wrestle him to jump out the window at the very beginning, she just screams out like Jonathan, like she's like afraid for him, or maybe she's like disappointed in him, like she's like, oh, it's happening again. But then it happens again at the end when the Hugh Grant character does the same thing, and it almost like mirrors that scene, and it's so funny. Just this. It just, the camera focuses right on this little halfling, and she just says, Jonathan. It's so funny. It is so funny. Love it.
My favorite.
That's good. That's good. And then one more superlative. Let's say.
What is your favorite character? Or creature. I meant creature.
Oh, favorite creature. Okay. Chonky dragon.
Yeah, I knew it.
The chonky dragon. They meet this dragon who I think is, I didn't do the research, and I haven't run into him before, but he's like a named character. I think he's canon in the Forgotten Realms, and he's like a fat dragon, and he's so funny, and they're getting like chased out of this.
Scary, but
he's scary, but he's
really
so
brilliant
fat.
that it's like, it feels like a beginning D&D campaign.
Yeah. We're going to make it silly, but it's going to be a dragon, but it's going to be a little bit silly, but also very dangerous.
Because dragons are big deals in Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah.
So if you come up against a dragon on an early level, it means there's something that's like really holding it back.
Right. Yeah.
And in this case,
because the dragon will eat you very quickly.
Smart.
Yes.
They are powerful. Mm-hmm. They have magic. They have strength. They have
everything.
They're very hard.
So if this dragon's not getting you, it's because it has a huge handicap of some kind.
And this time it was because
it was so chonky. It was really, really cute. It's so funny.
I loved him.
Yeah, it's good.
And all you do in those situations, early levels, you have to run away.
Yeah,
that's it. That's what.
And that's what they
did.
And they did. And escaped cleverly again.
They did escaped cleverly.
I love that. So good. I liked it.
I thought it was good.
Yep.
Good superlatives. Did you have another one? Sounded like you were gearing
I was
up.
gonna. I've forgotten
I just wanted to
now.
talk about the chonky dragon.
I was gonna just say like favorite gaming reference, like favorite rules reference. And I had when they go to the cemetery and they're going to talk to the dead people,
goodness.
and it's
Excellent.
like, well, I have this speak with dead spell, and so it'll wake up, it'll be alive, and you'll have 5 questions to ask. It's like, well, why 5 questions? I don't know. That's just how it works. Well, it seems kind of arbitrary, but that's how the spell works. Where it's just like, yeah, you just get 5 questions. That's it, and there's no reason. It just is that way, and I just love that they paid homage to that. It's very funny.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So after the superlatives, we didn't do the unearned moment.
Oh, unearned moment. Oh yeah.
I know we loved.
We loved it so much. We didn't have anything unearned. That's not true. Unearned moment.
Yes. Mine was. Kind of in because everything kind of happened quickly. There's a scene at the end. This red wizard is like doing this great big spell to turn all of the people of Neverwinter into an undead army. Like there's this big spell. They're all gathered in this arena.
Yeah.
Where the main characters are like trying to. They escape out of this arena in this big like gladiator duel type thing. And as they're escaping, they see this happen. They see this like big spell coming up in the sky, and they're like, okay, well, we have to save the town.
Yeah.
And to save the town, what they do is they use that wand of teleportation, whatever it's called, and send all of the treasure that they escape with onto this hot air balloon that's flying around the city so that it draws all the people out of the arena to save them.
Yeah.
My problem with that is that if anyone saw the weird magic cloud,
They'd already be running.
And if it was that easy for them to just trickle out of the arena for them to be saved,
Yeah.
it just like doesn't feel like a good, like, why didn't they bar all the doors then if that was the
Right.
case? Because the second they saw this big old scary spell,
They'd be out.
they'd be gone.
Absolutely.
But like the town was saved
Yeah. Yeah.
because treasure was falling from the
treasures-
sky. That they saw the treasure before they saw the magical big. I mean, it was enormous. It was so big that they were sailing. They were so far away in this boat
Yeah.
when they even noticed it.
Right. They
So
saw
they
it was
were
already
so
happening.
far away.
Yeah.
But everyone noticed the flying gold before they noticed the magic cloud. So I didn't quite.
Yeah, that was
they-
there was some rushing right there at the end, it seemed.
Again, or it feels like a little moment where it's like, oh, the DM thought it was a cool way to save them,
and that
so they
didn't-
made it, so they let it work, which doesn't actually work
For
story
a movie. Right. It doesn't work for a movie. It might work at the table, and
Yeah.
that'd be fun. Because you're using the treasures you have, they keep their promise to give the money back to the town.
Yeah.
And it's like a really oversimplified motivation for the people.
Yeah.
Give them money, they'll escape out of the arena. Okay.
We want the treasure. They didn't even build it up that everyone is like.
Everyone's like really destitute and poor. I mean, the city looks beautiful, so I'm not sure.
Right, Neverwinter
anybody's
is like a
really
nice, fancy, big town.
Yeah.
Big city.
until it's like burned to the ground. But yes,
That's, oh, man.
unearned moment.
Yeah.
I think probably the dragonfly moment. Where it's and it's just the really quick. They're just adding in a little dream moment with Edgin.
Edgin.
Edgin has a dream about his wife, and they're like chasing some dragonfly, and she says, "You have to let it go." And it's like, okay.
And
Really?
there's a little
Oh,
dragonfly
really?
that's shown up.
There is a little dragonfly
they
that
do
keeps
put
like
it
showing up, and
in
it's
the
just
thing,
it's
and, like,
all
I think
so
it's
fast.
Clearly that it's supposed to be
It's a
this
symbol,
reminder of
sure.
his wife.
Sure, it's a lot of symbolism, but it's just everything is so quick, and it doesn't have the gravitas that I think a moment like that would need.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that would be my unearned moment.
Weirdly, the scene between Bradley Cooper and Holga feels more grounded and earned.
It does weirdly.
Yeah.
And it's like a little bit out of left field.
Yeah. And speaking of Oscar moments, if we're
actually-
going to do an acting moment Bradley Cooper, I would give that
Absolutely.
scene is like the
And
best acting.
Yeah,
in the
both
whole
of them
movie.
actually. I
And
like
both of them
them.
are excellent at this
Yeah.
scene. I just was like so shocked at how good that scene was.
It was really
Crazy.
good, and it's so silly because he's like this little halfling sitting on an oversized chair, and he was married to this enormous barbarian, and he's married to another
one.
enormous
But
barbarian.
like, it's
just
silly,
not
but like he doesn't play it
Right.
Like it's
No,
it's not a
nobody
ridiculous
does.
situation. Nobody does, and it's like really, it feels really real and
Yeah.
really grounded, and
we're laughing because we're just seeing it from the outside, but they do it.
it's like a
totally
dramatic
real.
irony.
Yeah,
Rather than
we both really liked the movie.
yeah.
It was true to the gamers. It was true to just good old fashioned action movies. Very very funny. Good performances. Good design. Was a bit fast.
Was a bit fast, I think.
It was a little bit
It's the
fast.
only negative.
Yeah.
But especially if you are a fan or a player of D&D, you'll find lots of little things.
Yeah,
that
and go check it out.
It's so fun.
still in the theaters. I don't think it's going to be streaming for a little while, but when it is, it'll probably be on Paramount. I was doing a lot of research.
Good for you.
So thank you all for listening in or watching. If you're watching it, you can follow us on the Instagram and the Twitter and the Facebook and the TikTok at Then a Moment Pod. If you have any notes or want to tell us our opinions are terrible or awesome, you can email us at thenamomentpod@gmail.com and find us on the web at thenamomentpod.com.
Woo.
Woo! I'm Pavi Proczko, and don't forget to feed your chonky dragon or he'll be very mad.
And I'm Colin Funk. And always roll a wild magic table to see what life gives you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Then a Moment, a Pavitas production project, hosted by Colin Funk and Pavi Proczko. This podcast is produced by Chicago Podcast Studio. Our opening cartoon was created by Gloriu, and our theme song was composed by me, Pavi Proczko. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening platform. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Then a Moment Pod, all one word, for updates on new episodes and behind-the-scenes content. If you have any feedback, comments, concerns, or kudos, you can email us at thenamomentpod@gmail.com. Please rate and review us wherever you can. It would help us out a bunch. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.